readers. Welcome to Book Launch Tuesdays, the best thing to happen to Tuesdays since tacos. Tonight we have Todd Fahnestock with Falling to Fly, the book to read before you give up on your writing dreams. Dreamer, wannabe, overnight success, catastrophic failure, writer. Glimpse the gritty behind-the-scenes struggles of author Todd Fahnestock as he reveals his dreams, trials, and adventures through the creative swamps of writing and the hard-edged world of publishing. Welcome, Todd. Congratulations on your new book.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Hey, you are always a welcome guest. You can come on whenever you like. So Falling to Fly, nonfiction, and this is not your first foray into nonfiction, though. Yeah,
it's like my second nonfiction book. The first one was Ordinary Magic, which was a memoir of my journey with my 14-year-old son on the Colorado Trail. 450 miles, 5 weeks. We were alone on the trail together. It was an unforgettable experience. But this one is a little bit different. This one it's similar as far as sort of chronicling a story of my own personal life, but it's very much geared towards assisting other writers as opposed to just a straight memoir. It's, this is what happened in my life in regards to writing and what I did during those moments and what I did to move through them. I joke, though it's probably not so much of a joke, but I joke that it's mostly about failure. Like, you want to look at somebody's, memoir that has like all the successes they've had in their life. It's not really focused as much on that as it is all of the but I think that that's part of the essence of it. It's like, if you want something, you keep moving through those, they become sort of part of the background. They just become just what you do, right, to get to where you're going.
I love that. And I have heard people call it failing to fly. And I argued, I'm like, no, it's falling to fly, because failing to fly, this is Todd we're talking about. Like, he gets real, but there's always a positive side. So I love that you share that. So is that what this book like involves, right? So you said it talks about failure, but do you give us some hope? Do you give us something to hold on to?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. In fact, one of the quotes that I say in the book is that, a person who is unafraid of failure is practically indestructible, because then, what's stopping you? What's going to stop you? And the answer is nothing's going to stop you. I mean, if you're willing to embrace the failures that come along and turn them into lessons instead, then you just keep building the foundation to your pyramid, climbing to the sky. That's pretty much what happens in the book. And yes, there are victories in the end, for sure.
That's good, because that's what Becca says, that there's so much hope in this book. I mean, I can't imagine you writing a book that's going to make us all depressed. Well, at least not for long. I mean, you do write fiction that's pretty devastating sometimes. But no, I love that. But that's kind of the point sometimes. But so the nonfiction, I love that you're actually hitting this. This is the first time, because you have many, many writers that admire you, admire your work, admire your persistence. And now you've written a book to kind of help us along. I was wondering, did you have any specific people in mind? Not that you have to give names, but specific type of people in mind when you were writing this?
Honestly, it was almost like I was talking to my younger self. I mean, there's been so many times where I have just been just beside myself, thinking, well, this is never going to happen. I'm never going to find a path to the dream. I talk a lot about the dream with a capital D throughout the course of the book. And so I think I was mostly talking to my younger self, but I do think that there are lots and lots of people who will benefit from that kind of conversational tone. But no, I was not thinking of anybody in specific. I mean, if I was thinking of somebody in specific, I probably wouldn't call them out on a podcast. But
yeah, that's what I said. Don't say names.
Honestly, I wasn't thinking of anybody in specific.
I love that. See, that's part of your uplifting nature, Todd. You can't even throw anyone under the bus. I mean, come on. But in this case, it was inspiration. But no, I can see that. But you're talking to your younger self can be talking to another author struggling at the time. So actually, it makes sense to me both ways.
For sure.
Yeah. And I mean, we need to talk
I think
about
anybody who's ever questioned their Sorry. I think we got a bit of a lag. My apologies for that. But I think, anybody who's ever struggled with finding their inspiration to keep going as a writer, anybody who's ever, worked up to try and get to the top of the mountain only to tumble back down, or to run for an open doorway to have it slammed in their face. I mean, a lot of that I deal with in here. And yes, find paths around, find ways through. That's a lot of what the book is about.
I love it. Now, I haven't had time to read this book yet. I'm very excited to get to it, but I haven't had time yet. So can you tell us a little bit about how it is structured? Because you said there's a lot of the falling parts until you get to the flying. But like, how is it structured? Is there like a lesson per chapter? Is there something that you've learned? Like, how is it structured when we sit down to read it?
So I think a lot of us have probably read Stephen King's On Writing. And in that book, the way that he structures that book is he's got the first part, which is his CV, is what he calls it, his curriculum vitae. And then he's got the second part, which is his toolbox, right? And the first part is just all of his little anecdotal stories of how he kind of became a writer, right? How he came to be doing this. And then the second part is, here's what I think works for making better prose, better story, better plot, better whatever, right? These are all the tools. And I found when I read that book, I was far more interested in his stories. I gleaned a lot more by reading between the lines on his little stories. So as this book originally started out as a how to write a novel, it's not exactly that anymore. It's more of an inspirational book, right? There are some kind of tools that you can use as a writer in it, but mostly it's those little anecdotes. So everything I talk about with writing, how to persist, how to deal with the demons, how to deal with imposter syndrome, my forays into the traditional publishing arena, my forays into the indie publishing arena, all of the different things that I've learned kind of along those lines are all told through actual stories from my life. So one of the comments that I got on it is like, I sat down to read this writing how-to book, and I should have known that, Fahnestock would make it a page turner. So it's really mostly a story that once you get sucked in, it's going to pull you along, right? That's what I've been hearing about the story. So it's written like it's an epic fantasy novel, and I got to keep you entertained, and I got to keep you, churning forward. So that's kind of how the book is written. Once you get into it, it's probably going to pull you through. A lot of people were talking about how they were going to sit down and start reading it over the course of the next 5 days or so, and they read it in one sitting. It's not very long. It's only 46,000 words. It's not very long.
Well, that's the perfect link for an inspirational story. I'm okay with that. So, because they can get sappy. Right? So this is the perfect link that we need. And especially, let's face it, we writers like to find things to procrastinate, and you didn't give us enough. I mean, 46,000 words is not a very long procrastination tool. So
for sure.
Yes. But I'll take
one of my friends called one of my friends read this book, and he's like, this is like Kitchen Confidential for the publishing industry. I don't know if you ever read that book, Kitchen Confidential. But it's Anthony Bourdain's book about the culinary industry, and he kind of goes behind the curtain and talks about a lot of the stuff. So there's a little bit of that in this book. It's a little bit of a gritty tale of, kind of fighting the good fight behind the scenes and the things that you run into in the publishing industry.
And how bad do you want it?
And how bad do you want it? Yes.
Because that's definitely a trick for me. And I've also found that it's not only how bad you want it, but what are you willing to sacrifice to get there? So
and that as well.
Yeah, I find that I'm not sacrificing family time. So what's happening is it's happening slower for me, right? So it depends on what it is that you are looking for. So is there anything that you talked about in here that you had to sacrifice that kind of hurt a little?
Yeah, I like how you mention it like it's one thing.
Well,
yes,
I didn't want you to give away the whole book.
Well, I think the book starts out with a nightmare that I had when I was in my early teens. And it essentially becomes this sort of iconographic vision of what happens over the course of the whole book in real time. There's this cliff
like an epic fantasy. Sorry.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Right. So there's this cliff that I fall off in this dream. And it's one of these recurring dreams where I fall and I fall and I fall, and then I wake up before I hit the ground, right? And then that happened over and over and over and over again. And at one point in the dream, I am so pissed off at this dream that just doesn't stop. It just keeps going, that I'm like, screw it. I'm just jumping off this time. And so I run at the end of the cliff and I leap off the cliff. And from there, possibilities start to open. Unlikely, ridiculous. Like you would never have imagined this kind of possibility opening up. And at the end of the dream, I end up on the ground and I've made it, right? I didn't fall and splat.
The end of the dream.
Exactly. And then the next night I have the dream again. I do the same thing. I land on the ground. I have the dream again. I do the same thing. I land on the ground, and then the dream stops. I never had that dream ever again. And the night after that, I had my first flying dream. So this is the sort of iconographic story where like I lift off the ground and I start flying around the air at will, right? And this is the iconographic macrocosm that starts at the beginning of the book. And then my journey into the publishing world, there's a moment where I leap off the cliff. There's a lot of sacrifices that get made, but there's a moment where I have this commitment and I'm like, you know what? I'm putting a lot at risk. I'm putting my family's finances at risk. I'm putting, my future in this particular career that I had built over 15 years at risk. All of these things in order to chase the dream of being, that Stephen King level author, right? And I won't spoil it. It doesn't happen the way that I always envisioned it, but it does start to happen. And the lessons learned along the way are really, they've shaped my life. So that's what this book is about. That's what the Falling to Fly title means.
I love it. I love it. Well, it is. I mean, we're not talking Stephen King level at this point, but definitely professional level. I mean, you were your first invited guest, where they actually paid to have you there at a con this weekend. So tell us, what was it like to level up like that?
It was so much fun. I'm afraid it put undue pressure on Becca, who's used to working the booth with me. I just go and I work the booth all weekend, but this time I was on 9 panels. So I was 3 panels a day, every single day. And,
I'll be back later, Becca.
Exactly. And I come back and Becca's like,
sign these books. I'm going on break.
Right. Exactly. I've got a stack over here. Sign them. But one of the funny things, I'll tell you a story from Planet Comic-Con where I did some panels for the first time at Planet Comic-Con, and I went to this panel, and it was the first time I'd done this, and it was called Dungeons and Dragons: Tips and Tricks from Storytelling Tips and Tricks from author Todd Fahnestock, right? And we threw this out there. We didn't expect them to pick it, and they picked it, and so it was a panel. It was a solo panel. Nobody else was on. It was just me, and I'm like. It was kind of confusing at Planet Comic-Con where to go to be on the panel. So, they offered to send a volunteer by to get me. And the volunteer, Bonnie, she was great. She comes by the booth and she's like, "Are you ready to go?" I'm like, "Yeah." And so I'm nervous and I'm talking about, a mile a minute. You know how I get when I get nervous, "Oh, so it's such a great con and I'm here and we're selling lots of books and it's really great. And I'm really happy to be on the panel and it's going on and on and on. And she kind of turns and looks at me and she's like, "So are you excited?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, sure. I'm excited. I've never done this panel before, but it's not like there's going to be a lot of people there. It's going to be 2 people, maybe 3 people, maybe 4. She's like, "Oh, you think only 4?" I was like, "Maybe 2, but it's fine. It's fine. It's going to be great. We're going to have a good time anyways." Right. Yeah. And so we get there and it's packed. It's a standing room only. And she kind of looks at me with this sort of smug smile. And I look at the easel. And I look at the room and I look at the easel and she's like, "That's your name on the easel." I'm like, "I guess that is my name on the easel." And she's like, "Go knock him dead." And so I went in there. It was a room. It was 270 person capacity room. And they had to turn people away. The fire marshal literally had to turn people away. And I was right next door to John Bernthal. The Punisher was in the room next door to me. So that was an awesome moment where it was just jam packed. Cool. And everybody had a good time. It was a really fun. I mean, I walked up, I sat down behind the microphone. And I was like, "So I was expecting 3 people. I don't know what the rest of you are doing here. But we're going to have a good time."
I love it. Yeah, but that's a great opportunity because there were fans there and then there were people who didn't know you. But I bet no one left that room not a fan. I have seen you turn a room. I can guarantee you. Yeah.
I would like to believe that. I'm going to believe your vision of that. That would be nice.
Yeah, I guarantee you that's true. But it was clever. It was a clever panel, though. It was very clever to talk. It's D&D storytelling, so you kind of cross genres, so you can get a big audience because you had multiple things to talk about. That was very clever. Yeah, very clever. You knew what you were doing.
I'm pretty sure that, of the 270 people. Yeah, I'm pretty sure of the 270 people that were there, 268 of them were there because it said Dungeons and Dragons. I'm well convinced of that.
But they didn't leave, did they? They stayed. So you did your job, man. That's stayed, right. Yep. I am making notes for panels for next year. That's right. Exactly it. I'm going to write it down. That sounds fun. The storytelling with D&D is awesome. We had a panel that was the storytelling of Star Trek, and that one was packed, right? So yeah. People love story. And, we've seen that, right? We've been in rooms where people are like, oh my gosh, you're a writer? Like you create these things? And for us, we're like, well, yeah, how can you not? They won't shut up, So it's a different kind of thing.
Right?
Yeah, I love it. It's awesome.
Yeah. At Fan Fusion, I did a storytelling panel where I ranked the MCU. I ranked the movies in the MCU and did 7 criteria as to what, I ranked 1 through 10 on 7 criteria, then averaged the ranking to give each of my top 10 of the MCU a ranking.
Logic for? And it takes all the fun out of it.
Well, I'm glad I did because I was preparing for tomatoes to be thrown. Because, if you don't pick someone's favorite movie, if Civil War or something like that, or Captain Marvel doesn't get in the top 10, and they're like, what are you talking about? This is I was expecting a whole lot of pushback, and it wasn't as bad as I thought. They were pretty respectful. There was definitely someone I was like, okay, and here's where Guardians of the Galaxy ranks in. They're like, no, and there was some in the background, but I definitely pulled those voices forward. I'm like, well, tell me your reasons. Maybe you'll convince me. So. Yep.
And they're like, no, it's emotional.
Yeah. Captain Wyvern said, how long did it take to remove the tar and feathers, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Tar and feathers, not long. Yeah, I am not brave enough to do that on the stage. I'll tell you that right now. That's part of that bravery of the falling over and over again. You were like, I'm good, man.
Right. This could be the end of my panel career, but I'm going to try it anyways.
Yeah. Apparently Becca was one of the ones that was yelling at boo from the back.
Yeah, no, when I presented my list, she's like, why is Guardians not at the top of the list? I'm like, because this is. And she's like, no. Because it's goofy, and Becca likes goofy shit. So,
I like it too, but not top of the list. And quite frankly, I think the most recent one was the best one because it wasn't as goofy. It was very emotional, and I loved it.
Oh yeah, the third one was intense.
That one I have watched multiple times. It's the only one I have watched multiple times. So.
Well, I cannot claim the same. I've watched Guardians of the Galaxy over and over and over again.
So, I have to ask now, which one was on top?
So I gave Avengers Endgame the top spot. And right below that was Avengers the first one. And the reason Endgame, because I think if you put Endgame out there just as a movie all by itself, it would not have been at the top. So it was very much a function of the fact that they landed the airplane, MCU took off on this grand adventure of these multiple movies, and the difficulty of telling a story like that and actually having something satisfying at the end, damn near impossible. Almost impossible.
Think about it. We got Game of Thrones didn't do it. Lost didn't do it. We could just keep going on all these ones that didn't do it, right? Yep. And they did. I agree.
They did. Yeah. So my daughter did not like that Captain America was turned old. She hated that. But I liked it. I thought it was great. I felt like they brought, Tony Stark and Captain America are probably arguably the two main characters. You could throw Thor in there, but I think emotionally speaking, those were the two sort of protagonists, and they brought both of their character arcs full circle in that, and whether you liked their full arc or not, or you wanted them to go somewhere else, or you wanted Captain America to still be around, all that aside, they did it well. They finished the arc well. And that's from a storyteller's perspective. It's so many people just make the story, churn it out until nobody cares anymore, until it gets so bad that nobody cares anymore. And to end a story while people not only care, but it is all eyes are on you, absolutely positively. And then to end the story well, that it took courage and it took some good writing. So that's, that's why Endgame made it to the top for me.
Yeah. No, I agree.
I also
that works. It's not my favorite, but I see why you chose it. I think that's perfectly logical. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of people said that. And a couple people were like, that wouldn't have been my top. But now that you've explained it, maybe it is. So I actually changed some minds on that one. Not that I'm out to try and change anybody's mind about what their favorite Marvel movie is. I think every single movie in the Marvel universe is awesome because I'll tell you, when I was a kid, what we had like, The Punisher with Dolph Lundgren, and we had Howard the Duck. These were our Marvel movies back in the day. And why they chose to make Howard the Duck like the big cinematic thing, I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Me neither. I'm with you. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. And we had little movies like, we had like Beastmaster, right? We had like, not Marvel, that like these were our only movies we had to cling to. And I always laugh when people are like, I don't understand why you like those movies. I'm like, you don't understand. This is the stories we love. And they were the only ones we had. So that was it. It's all we had. So yeah, it's so nice to have choice now.
Yeah, I love it how in the chat Becca is talking about she had her favorites, but then when she saw my list, she was like, "Oh, you're right. You're absolutely right."
Oh yeah, that's totally
Guardians
what
of the Galaxy should be fifth. That's where it belongs.
She said you didn't change her mind. That's why you work well together. I mean, if your mind meld energy worked on her, you really couldn't work together. It would not work. She's like, I'm resistant to your charm.
A little more time, and she will understand which is the better movie.
Maybe she'll change your mind, Todd. Could happen.
Now she's talking about some creature called the Gotgi. I don't even know what that is. So, I mean, she's clearly gone around the bend. Gotgi is the king. I don't know who Gotgi is, but
I think it's a video
talking
game.
Marvel movies back.
It's totally a video game. It's not Guardians of the Galaxy or anything. I love it. I love it. Well, so we talked about this. Oh no. Your Gen X is showing.
My
hey,
Gen
Becca,
X
take
is showing.
that back. Apparently. Now you're gonna get us both on our sides and not yours. So watch it. Didn't you see what happened on TikTok and Instagram when they came after Gen X? Remember? You better be careful. I don't know if you saw that, Todd, but it was extremely entertaining, and I was so excited about it.
Outstanding. I did not see it.
There was this whole thing. They're like, how come Gen X never gets any crap? And then all the Gen X people who are also it's not like the boomers who couldn't figure out technology, right? They're like, no, leave them alone. They're sleeping for a reason. Don't wake them up. That was the millennials telling Gen Z to leave the Gen Xers alone. They're like, they raised us. Trust me, you don't want to mess with them. So funny. And then one of the girls at the end, she was like, wait, they're coming. Hold on. She's like, best movie in the world? I think it's a toss-up between Labyrinth or Spaceballs. I almost died. I'm like, yeah, that millennial knows Gen X. It was so funny. So
they didn't throw Back to the Future in there, so I'm a little bit pissed off.
Well, she had to choose two, and I mean, let's face it. I mean, between men and women, she kind of nailed it right there. So she did a good job. But there was a lot more, but that's not what we're here to talk about. But I was quite amused. It was funny. So don't turn on our Gen X. We'll get you. Remember, we were latchkey kids. We took care of ourselves.
That's right. We took care of ourselves. We'll take care of you.
That's right. One of the commenters said, "Don't mess with the Gen X. They're like as tough as the boomers, but they can actually format a PDF." I almost died. Yeah, it was funny. But yeah, it was awesome. But so what was I talking about? Because that was way more funny. Oh, the falling to fly. So yes. So which is what we're here to talk about, but this is the point, right? So it's not, you've done like many interviews like this. You've gone along. The first time I met you, you were at Superstars, like only for the first pages party thing, right? And then you were already writing for years at that point. Were you published? You were published by then, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So you were already published too. And so like even from
the first time when I was 21, actually.
Excellent. So for years, you've been doing this for years. And so you still had that positive energy there. So I actually want to give a little bit, because when we did that, I had been in a pretty toxic critique group. And I took what you taught us there and brought it back and formed another critique group, and it was really healthy. And I was in it for years.
Oh, good.
So
good,
that was
good.
really cool. So I'm wondering if part of the falling is trying to find other people to write with, right? To learn how to write when you're right at that beginning and trying to do it. But some of those groups can be really toxic, like the first couple I ended up in. So would you mind like sharing the bit of advice that you gave?
Sure.
I don't remember the specific, but you did the speech over and over again, so surely you do.
Well, yeah,
for critique groups.
I'll actually pull it straight from the book. One of the things that I talk about, I think, is in chapter 2, maybe chapter 3, where I talk about, if something is not driving your writing career forward, if something is not elevating your writing, it is not useful, especially when you're a young author. Like, I don't care how decorated the person who's talking to you is or how great of an editor they think they are. If they are damaging your interest in continuing to write, it's not useful. And I'm not saying that you don't need a thick skin as a writer. If you want to be a professional writer, you do have to develop that. However, in the fledgling stages, you don't need your neighbor 3 doors over telling you how great an editor they are and then just ripping the crap out of your stuff when you're still trying to find your sea legs. Like, you don't need that. And if you don't need that, it is not useful. When I was in high school, I had a teacher who just hated the stuff that I wrote. And one of the chapters that I wrote in this book is called Selective Ignorance. Oftentimes when we hear the word ignorance, we think that it's a bad thing, right? And most of the time it is a bad thing. But selective ignorance is essentially choosing to ignore certain things so that you can keep the important, with a capital I, thing in view, right? Because if you lose sight of the important thing, then the rest of it doesn't even freaking matter, right? So when I was in high school, I had to ignore that teacher and say, you know what? I do want to write epic fantasy. And then when I was in college, my professor was like, we're not going to teach how to do genre fiction here because genre fiction is not real fiction. And so again, I was like, you know what? And I didn't take, after that class, I didn't take any more writing classes in college because, I mean, one of the things I talk about in the book is that, if you want to learn how to write academically and you want to learn how to write, academic literature, then college is very useful. If you want to learn how to write genre fiction, it's not as useful because it's trying to teach you a very specific thing. And in some cases, like in my case, they tell you that it's not even real fiction, which I didn't understand that. I still don't exactly understand that. I thought that fiction, the definition of fiction was something that was imagined that is put on the page. That is fiction. But
and what's more imagined than genre fiction?
Exactly. So my point was that was not helpful to me. And so I let it go. And you have to make those calls for yourself. In the end, especially in this day and age, this wild west of publishing where so much is indie, some is still trad, there's mixtures of all this kind of stuff. You have to be the captain of your own ship as a writer. You have to decide what your path is. In fact, it's probably better if you do. And once you do that, then you have to decide what you're going to accept, what you're going to reject, and then stand on your own 2 feet. Because there's a lot of people that are going to try and talk you into the fact that, well, if you don't accept this and this and this kind of wisdom, you're not a real writer. And oh my gosh, if you have imposter syndrome demons like I do, they're going to come after you and take that and just, hammer that chord over and over and over again. So that's also part of what I talk about in this book.
I love it. I love it. So if you want more wisdom like that, get Falling to Fly. Seifa will put the link in there. And if you're watching the VOD later, the link is below in the show notes. So yeah, no, that's great advice. I loved it. It was very useful for me. And so we formed a new critique group. And I was in charge, so I made sure that didn't happen.
Yeah.
So
there you go.
Nice.
There you go.
That's right. I believe we all have different stages. And to be kind.
Yeah, and I think, like in those critique groups, you've got people that, writers are traditionally sensitive people, and we put up a whole lot of fronts to make it seem like we're not as sensitive as we are. But I think in order to write, you kind of have to have a certain sensitive side of your personality. And a lot of those,
if you have no empathy, how can you actually create characters? Yeah, exactly.
Yep. And so, because of that, we have all these defense mechanisms that we throw up, and some of these defense mechanisms show themselves in the form of, I am the best editor ever, and you should listen to me. And this is where they get their self-worth from. And so they really will push it. They will try and convince you that they know best for your book what needs to happen. And it's never true. It's never true. There are things you can glean from people, that will help you with your writing. I am not saying that you don't need an editor. Please don't take that from this. You do need an editor. So
Yeah.
don't take that away from this, but remember that you are the captain of your own ship. And sometimes the editor is going to say something that does not resonate with you, and you have to be able to stand in your own power and push back against them at certain times, or explain to them, because sometimes they're trying to help you and they don't understand what it is you were trying to do, probably because you didn't convey it very well. So if you explain it to them, then they'll be like, oh, okay, if that's what you're trying to do, you're not doing it. Try this, I mean, it could be something as easy as that.
That is totally not what I got,
Right?
I'm pretty sure I've said that note before. That is not what I got. So just so you know, if that's what you meant, then hey, you're good to go. But otherwise, you might want to. I love it. Yeah, Becca says Todd has a persistent optimism. It's just who he is. This book is a condensed, portable dose of Todd optimism and resilience. You need to put that on the thing. I like that.
Right?
Condensed,
I was just
portable
saying,
dose of Todd optimism. There. Yeah, I love that. I mean, we can't all carry you around with us. First of all, you are very tall and you're not going to fit in any of my bags. So that's not going to work. But, the book, I can squeeze that in. That'll work very nicely.
Becca kind of sounds a little bit like a drug dealer there. And I'm the drug, right? I mean, she's like, oh, get a dose of this. Here, we'll just, we'll shoot you up with a little bit of this.
So is the interview the free part? Now buy the book.
Right.
Now that you're addicted.
You get the first one for free.
That's right. I love it.
Oh, also, I've noticed the links. You can also get this book on my website, directly from my website, if you want to. And in fact, you can get a signed copy through my website. Probably cost a little bit more because of shipping, but you can get the copy signed if you want.
Oh, I love that. So I'm assuming it's just toddfahnestock.com.
Yeah, Becca can probably throw that link up in the chat if Zappo doesn't have it.
I don't know. You're going to have to change what you think is the, number one Marvel movie. Oh, Captain Wyvern did it for you. You're okay.
Way to go, Captain Wyvern.
Becca's like, yeah, I'll put it up. GOTG. I love it. And I think that's one of the things that the writer, obviously you're a very important part of my writer community. And as you go along, you kind of collect writers, right? It's probably is that optimism, right? The persistent optimism, because we have self-doubt just like you do, right? So for you to acknowledge that this exists and you can survive it is very nice for the rest of us. I'm wondering, are there any other communities that you gain strength from besides the writing one?
Oh, I mean, my group of friends from college, I still hang out with a lot of them. In fact, in a couple of weeks, we're going up to camp. We've been camping ever since college. Well, not since college, but for the last 21, 22 years, we all get together at this campsite and just kind of hang out for 3-4 days, play board games. We're geeks, right? So the board games come up with us, and we make this whole pavilion where we lay out the board games, and we're all playing board games, and the kids are running around in the forest and the dogs are running around. I mean, it's really, really great. And we have community meals and that sort of thing. But so that's a strong community for me, and it's nice to have that because they remember me back when I was trying to string 2 sentences together. So they're not impressed when I have a best-selling book that comes out or anything like that. They're like, So, anyways, that's good to have that as a community.
Another community.
But yeah, I mean, at this point, it's really just kind of the writers community and then my own personal friend community, I think, is what I fall back on.
I mean, there's only so many hours in the day, and these children demand our time. It's very frustrating.
Yeah. Although my children aren't going to be demanding my time too much anymore. My youngest just graduated high school. He's headed off to college in the fall. Just sent his letter of intent and his deposit. So he'll be heading out to the Northwest. So.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Is that the son you go hiking with? He's going to like the Northwest, isn't he?
Yes, he is. He's already visited the college and he really is going to enjoy it. Yeah, it's going to be great. Very excited for him.
That's awesome. Excited. Do you think any of your children caught the writing bug? Or did you warn them away?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Not that you can, right? You can't stop it if it's there. Yeah.
When my kids were 4 and 5 and 6, I'm like, the best thing you can do is be a writer. And then, as they got older, I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I do to you? What
Don't
did I
do this?
Right. Stop, turn around. No, my daughter actually right now, she's here in Denver. She's in college, but she took she has these sort of on-site internship things. And her current internship is to write a book. So she has been doing that right now. That's been her big thing.
That's awesome. Good
she
for
is
her.
A writer. Yep. And she's phenomenal. She's really good.
But does she write genre fiction or like real fiction? I mean, I'm just
She
curious.
does write genre fiction. Yeah, real fiction. Yeah. The hackles on the back of my neck went up when you said that. But then I was like, oh yeah, she's quoting me. Okay.
I mean, what do I publish? You know, I don't have that belief.
I know. Yeah, that's why I was only for like half a second. I was like, "What did you say?" And then I was like, "Okay, calm down."
Oh wait, it's just Kelly. Yeah. Hold on.
One of the things I talk about in Falling to Fly is I naming the voices in my head. So it's kind of fun in that respect because I think most writers have some voices in their head. And one of the voices that has saved my life over and over and over again, saved my writing career at the very least, is called the Little Rebel. And the Little Rebel is like, he's a force of nature. He's like the nuclear deterrent, right? And he sits in the background most of the time because he's rude, he's profane, he uses a lot of profanity. He usually just screams the F word at me until I get moving and writing again when I'm not writing. And anybody who tries to pull me off the path, he's like, oh yeah, come at me, bro. So the Little Rebel peeked out for a second there when you were like, yeah, and if you're wanting to, do real fiction, I was like, what did she say? What was that she said?
Like, let me at her. I love that. Becca wants to know what surprised you about this book. Well, that's a good question.
Becca's like, she's a plant because she already knows what surprised me about this book. Everything surprised me about this book. Oh, yeah, it's true. No, it's a good question. It's a good question.
Yeah, it is.
But yeah, I was like I said, I was expecting this to be a how-to writing book. This was supposed to be my Save the Cat. This was supposed to be my, my story can beat up your story kind of book, right? That would be like a toolbox, like Stephen King's toolbox for on writing. And it ended up being this instead. And the funny thing was, it actually almost didn't see the light of day. I got done with it and I wanted to, as I mentioned before, have like anecdote, tool. And that's not the way that it ended up. It was more like, story and how this, drove me forward. Another story, how this drove me forward to make me persistent to following this dream and all of the spiritual aspects that came in line with why I'm doing this and pushing it forward in this kind of pure and almost innocent sense. Like, I mean, weathering the stones and the slings and the arrows and the spears of the publishing industry and still trying to stick to why I got into writing in the first place. Right. Mm-hmm. So anyways, what surprised me was I got to the end of this thing and I realized it was pretty thin on the toolbox side of things. And I was like, well, I'm either going to scrap it or I got to go through and I got to overhaul like 70% of it. And Becca's Little Rebel jumped up and said, don't you touch it. Don't you even touch it. She's like, she took it away from me. She's like, you can't touch it. I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, well, you have lightning in a bottle here and you're talking about opening it and polishing the inside of the bottle. Like, don't do that. So I was like,
metaphor.
I was like, you're full of it. This is not lightning in a bottle. She's like, I tell you what, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get 6 of your super fans and we're going to get them on a Zoom call and we're going to get you on a Zoom call, but you are muted and your camera is blacked out. You don't get to talk. You don't get to say anything. You don't get to make any expressions. And they're going to read this and then they're going to get on here and they're going to talk about what they think about it. Right. And you're going to see that I'm right and that you're wrong, that I'm right and that you're wrong. And let me repeat that if you didn't hear it. I'm right and you're wrong. And I was like, all right. But if I'm right and you're wrong, then you need to back off, give me the book back and I will fix it. Right. And so we got on the Zoom call and she was right and I was wrong. And then the Zoom call ended and
wait, I think you cut out a little. What was that, Tom?
Did I cut out? Oh, it's just that she was right and I was right. And then the Zoom call was over.
That's twice, Beck. It's on recording now.
Yeah, they all loved it. And so that took me by surprise. And it's still like, I mean, it was out for 2 weeks, I think, before I finally started going. In fact, it took me listening to the audiobook Like, cause there's an audiobook that I did.
Mhm.
Yeah, she never doubted. That's true. She never did. I listened to the audiobook like 2 or 3 times before I was like, yeah, maybe there's something to this. Maybe people will like this.
Did you record the audiobook?
Yeah, it's me.
So you recorded it, but it took you listening to it. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Huh. That is very fascinating.
Like, my perspective, I mean, these are the imposter syndrome demons. These are the I'm not good enough demons, right? And even as I was recording it, it was like, this is just the stupid stuff from my life. This is just like where I stubbed my toe and I tripped over the curb and I, slammed into the door. And like, who wants to hear this? Nobody wants to hear this, right? But as I listened to it, I realized that it had a subtle undercurrent that was all tied together. And I didn't see that. I couldn't see it. I was too close to it and I couldn't see it. Becca could see it. And so thank goodness for her. She took it away from me and made sure that I couldn't mess with it until I gained my sanity.
You could do a lesson one later. I mean, you like a how to write thing later. So this
Right?
is just gorgeous. Yeah, you can always do that later. So I'm very excited. It is like, it's not just lightning in a bottle, it's that light in the tunnel, right? And so I think maybe it's because
Well
you
said.
do have this, optimism that you're always, pushing, almost like so much so that I have to be optimistic that you just are that now, right? For us. So maybe that's what you just didn't see, but we need it. So we appreciate it. Thank you. I hope you have someone else to fall back on who helps you in your dark times.
I do.
Good.
Indeed, I do.
Good. That's what we all need, right? So you are that for a lot of us, Todd. So thank you very much for that.
That's very sweet of you to say.
And yeah, it's true. I mean, I recorded a birthday video for you because Becca asked me to, just because, and I have done that for anyone else, like ever. So there you go. But I do want to say thank you so much for being on the show. I'm very excited to read Falling to Fly. And what I would like to do again, the link is in the comments. It'll also be below in the show notes. And so everyone who is very excited and loves this and also wants to check out your fantasy adventures, where can they find you, Todd?
So they can find me at toddfahnestock.com. They just threw up the link on the chat there. And you can find me on Amazon as well. In fact, you can find this anywhere. It should be able to be ordered at Barnes & Noble, in addition to any other bookstore that you have that's out there. And at any con that I go to. They're listed on my website and they're listed on my readers group, which you haven't signed up for it. You should sign up for that. There's good stuff that come out in that as well. Lots of information. And that's also toddfahnestock.com. You go to that website, a pop-up will pop up and it'll say, sign up for Todd's readers group. And that's the place to get all of the latest news about what's going on. I do that about every 2 weeks. I'll send out one of those and it talks about everything that's coming out, which, if I may throw in a short plug for the Eldros Legacy story that I've got going on, the fifth and final book in my part of the Eldros Legacy comes out July 2nd, Bane of Giants. And, to switch away from the nonfiction to the fiction, I think you're in for a treat on this one. It's, if you've been following Eldros Legacy, it ends with a bang, or really, 68 bangs. There's just a lot.
Wait, you couldn't have made it 69? Come on, Todd. I mean, if you were going to go for a number.
Last one for the epilogue.
Oh, okay. That's fair. That's awesome. And yeah, for those who don't know, Todd Fahnestock goes to conventions all across the country. So make sure you get his newsletter. It is very likely he's going to be at one near you sometime this year. And Becca says the next one is Fan Expo Denver. So yeah, I would sign up for his newsletter.
Con. The next one is, yep.
I love it. So make sure, check out his newsletter, see where he's going. You want that signed copy, he will be there. And then you can tell Becca how right she is about everything. So she will probably be there too. So awesome. Thank you so much, Todd. We are so appreciative of you and proud of you too. So thanks for showing us how it can be done.
Well, you're very, very welcome. Thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate it, both of you. And Guardians of the Galaxy is number 5, actually. It's in fact number 5.
It's not number 1. Are you sure?